sometimes the process of creation can be quite sad or tumultuous.
We agree with you in the sense that contrast is necessary before the desire is formed. But once a vibrational desire has resulted within you, the creation never needs to be uncomfortable again for a moment.
Okay.
If you utilize your guidance system to stay on point with that.
Okay, well, I have an appreciation for, let's say, classical music. When you listen to the music of someone like Peter Tchaikovsky, whose music seems like it comes from sometimes other celestial worlds, sometimes maybe from the fairy realm, but this man had a very sad, tumultuous life, very repressed life, and all the way up to the end. So why are you listening to something that sounds so beautiful that's produced from something...
Because out of his pain, he honed a desire, and the music only flowed when he allowed that desire. In other words, what you're hearing is the culmination of his relief and release of resistance.
Okay.
You see?
All right.
And so when you're listening to the music, it's still alive. In other words, all of that resistance releasing quality is still within every phrase, every tempo that you're hearing. In other words, he was inspired to it. You're actually witnessing the process of his releasing of resistance. And so it can be experienced by you if you are wanting to release some resistance in the moment, you see. Mm-hmm. That's why so often people are moved to tears when they hear that kind of music.
Right.
And tear is always the releasing of resistance, always.
Did he have to have such a sad life to produce that same result?
We are not proponents of digging into hard places in order to find alignment, but we cannot discount the power of desire that is born out of powerful contrast, or the feeling of incredible release that comes when resistance is lifted. We can only feel appreciation for everyone who has ever asked for something, because it isn't until they ask that the energy that is us begins to flow. And so, from a selfish standpoint, whatever it takes to get the energy flowing is appreciated. But we agree with you completely. People suffer far more than is necessary. In other words, contrast from our point of view is, I prefer that to that, and I prefer that to that, and I prefer that to that. And if you do that enough, you get momentum going that gives you a glorious life. But when you really know you don't want something, and therefore you really know you do want something, when you align up with what you really want, that contrasting feeling is why actors and directors and writers put pathos in everything, because there's something delicious about the relief factor, you see. We think humans have carried the relief factor to absurdity. We do. We do. But there is something wonderful about relief. And the bigger it is, the better it feels.
Okay. Some insight, some refinement. Back in February of 2008 in Burlingame, a woman asked a question about, the question was asked, why do I create being around people who croak? And you shared something with us, an early conversation with you and Jerry, where Jerry said, listen, Abraham, I have the perfect incarceration idea. Let's put all the murderers on one island and all the rapists on another island and all the thieves on another one and have them all do it to each other. And you said, that's a great idea, but you already have those islands vibrationally. And this must have been early on. The audience didn't like that. So does that mean that if I'm murdered, I'm a murderer? And you go, no, it's because you carry the same vibration. And you took that to a very excellent perceptual thing where I could see it maybe 80% of the time. But what about those cases where you have, like, for instance, in Northern California, in Sonoma County, there's an unsolved crime in 2004 of a couple that were church camp counselors. Schwarzenegger at the time gave a $50,000 reward to solve the crime. It was never solved. Another case in point, most of the people in the community know who Ram Dass is. He wrote a beautiful letter called Rachel's Letter to a couple whose 11-year-old daughter was raped and murdered in a place in Oregon, where they moved to escape that energy from where they moved from. So those people created that. How did they create going out like that?
Well, you get what you think about whether you want it or not. And so when you prepare to prevent something, it's like getting more specific about it. It's like trying to get to the bottom of it. Let me get to the bottom of this. But by doing so, you activate more of a vibration, which makes it more likely that you will have an experience around it. It's complicated when you take situations and want systematic, or we always say that it's never a good idea to take a situation or similar situations and throw one blanket over it and call it the same thing, because everyone is really individually creating. In other words, the subject of physical death is something that is so misunderstood by humans. We were talking earlier, and we really liked the conversation about how can something that feels so wrong actually be right. Esther experienced this in a very strong way as Jerry made his transition, because it felt wrong to her. It felt wrong on every level that she could approach it. It felt like bad timing. It felt inappropriate. It was not what she wanted. It wasn't what she was writing about or thinking about. It wasn't what she wanted. And for a while, the wrongness of it was just sucking the life out of her. And then one day, she stumbled. It felt like stumbling, because it wasn't a thought she went looking for, but it was a thought that in her weariness she was able to find it. And the thought was, what if this isn't wrong, but what if it is right? What if it is only right? And then all of the exhilaration that she'd been missing came back. All of the feelings of clarity that she'd been missing came back. And it's such an interesting thing as humans. You're all here interacting together with so many lists of so many things that you've decided are wrong, that you hold yourself in resistance to all of the things that are right. And the thing that's so really interesting about that is that you wouldn't know the rightness if you didn't know the wrongness. In other words, if you didn't know what you don't prefer, you would not know what you do prefer. It really requires stepping back into a broader perspective in order to understand not just the rightness, but the perfection of this ongoing consciousness that is you. In other words, the opportunities to keep changing perspective, the opportunities to stand in another new place, the opportunities to look from a different vantage point, the opportunity to explore. In other words, that's what you are doing as you come into this physical experience. You are non-physical energy coming to a different vantage point. And when you reemerge into non-physical, it is equally exhilarating to then view it from another vantage point. And the thing that is tripping most physical beings up is that you think that the physical vantage point is where physical beings all come and just think about the physical. We're about to tell you something profound that you will always want to remember. You think that as you come into physical form, that you come with the intention of being physical and thinking about things that are physical. And then you incorrectly assume that when you are non-physical, that you are thinking about non-physical things. Right. When what you are always thinking about, whether you are non-physically focused or physically focused, is what's out here on this physical leading edge of thought. So when you look at it that way, just take Jerry, for example, and this body of work that we are about, or even Esther, as he has been approaching Esther through all of this time. Imagine what it was like for him to be physically focused and involved in all of this, setting up the meetings, getting the meeting rooms the way he liked them, posing the questions, putting it into an environment where it was perfect for you, wanting to make it conducive for you to come and ask whatever question that you wanted. In other words, as people would say, oh, you should do more of this or this or this, Jerry always said every single time, our work, what we want, meaning Esther and Jerry and Abraham, is to provide an opportunity for brilliant people to come forward with the basis of life that they have lived and present their point of view in this leading edge environment to take thought beyond that which it has been before. We trust that law of attraction will gather up those who are ready for that. Our work is not the promotion of it. Our work is the creation of the work, you see. So imagine the fulfillment and satisfaction that he had as he was the beginning asking and essential to the process of that evolution. Now imagine what it must be like for him. We're asking you to contemplate it from a joy level. Imagine what it must be like for him now to shift that point of consciousness and see it from the non-physical point of view. In other words, it was the next logical step for him, but you would have to understand the intensity of his desire in order to get it, you see. Hard thing to understand that anyone would prefer that to this. But the non-physical point of view is really, really good, you see.
Right.
But we are so all in this together. That's why your conversation about the magnificent creators of music is such an appropriate comparison in this, because the truly inspired work always allows the blending or the connection of physical and non-physical. Always.
It has been said that there's much more of a shock and recognition of birth than it is at death.
We say it often and we mean it. It takes you a little while to get refocused into your physical body and to regain your footing. But in the re-emerging into the non-physical experience, you take all that you are and you stand from that leading edge place. And you revel in everything that you see, and you have the ability to see everything.
With our leading edge of consciousness, I should suspect that we should emerge into a new form of commerce, letting the old fall away and new forms, whatever they are, to begin.
Well, can't you sort of see that coming? Give us more if you want to.
Well, right now we're in the Wall Street consciousness, and that's kind of like breaking down with the Occupy Wall Street understanding.
Is the word stalemate appropriate? Is the word non-movement appropriate? In other words, the standoff appropriate? In other words, unproductive appropriate? So out of all of that partisanship comes desire to begin to move again. And so the stronger the quagmire holds, the more powerful the desire to be free of it is, until eventually something will break loose. It has to. Because the desire is getting stronger and 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 stronger. Not just in you out here on the leading edge public, but even amongst those that are involved in a process that just isn't working. But the most wonderful thing to acknowledge is that it doesn't matter what those at the heart of the rules and the power think they are doing or not doing. They have nothing to do with you. They can't hold you back. They can't control your thought. They can't squash your emotions. They can't prevent you from your alignment. And one who's connected to this stream of enlightenment, to this powerful non-physical force, is more powerful than millions who are not.
So don't make them responsible for how I feel.
Don't make them accountable for anything.
Okay.
It just messes up your world.
Right. Thank you.
And it's the game they're playing. It's the game they're playing. That's their game, you see. That's their game. And again, going back to the very first conversation that we had at the very beginning here today, they couldn't exist in their current form if all of you weren't part of that process. In other words, they have become on the current of that which those that they represent are. So if you think of them as vibrational representation and you don't like what you see, then represent differently. And you don't have to wait for them to figure it out before you have your release. That's why there are always those who thrive in the harshest of conditions and always those who suffer in the best of conditions. It doesn't have anything to do with what you think it has to do with. It's not the conditions. It is your response to them which affects your vibration, which is at the core of your point of attraction, which is everything.
Okay. Thank you.